one.
As soon as I have my massive heart attack.
Alright, you are live. I'll be right back for you.
Okay. Great. Well,
Take care.
this is Grace Baptist Church. This is the Adult One Bible Study. My name is Norm Ellis, and I'm glad you're with us. We're about to begin. So, sorry we're a little bit late getting online, but we're here. How's everybody doing?
Okay.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Today we're going to be talking about a wonderful subject, the sin harvested. I'm just sort of a little play on it. No, it's not a wonderful thing, but it happens, and we need to be aware of what it means when we talk about this. The main idea is that God's judgment will be experienced by those who reject Him. I think I got it up there on my board there. That's our main idea of our study today. And if you're following along in your lesson book, we do use it as a guide. The primary one is the Bible. We're on page 82 and session number 9 today. And we'll be looking at these 4 points. 4 points, Norm.
For reason I can't scan.
How come there's 4 points? Yes, it's not 3, there's 4. You get a bonus point today. First one is false religion. Second one, oh, I didn't put the verses up there. Let's do that. You got to have the verses up there. So, first one is 5 through 8. 5 through 8. The next one is 9 through 10. The next one is 11 and 12. Oh boy, it's going to be a trickier one. I'm above there a little bit. And then 13 through 15.
I haven't tried rebooting.
All right, great.
Thank you.
So we'll be talking about false religion, misplaced trust, false religion 5 through 8 of chapter 10 of Hosea. I didn't say that, did I? And the third point is what could have been, 11 through 12. And the last point is sowing in righteousness, 13 through 15. And let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and then we'll begin. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the rain we've been having, for taking the fires down around here, and for cleaning the air and refreshing the earth. Lord, just pray for those that are on their way here. Keep them safe as they come, Lord. Be with those that we know that are sick and hurting, and just pray for their healing hand, Lord. I know there's several people right now in our church that we know of. And I just pray for Donna, for instance, and for Cece, and for Pat, and for Evelyn, and I'm missing somebody else. I forgot who it was. But who's that? Lonnie, yes, especially Lonnie and others, Lord. In your son's precious name, I just pray, amen.
Hermie and her family.
Hermie's family, yes, I forgot about Hermie passed on, and it was kind of quick. I heard she was in hospice. The next thing I knew, she's no longer in hospice. She's passed on. Hermie was a real sweet lady. I don't know if you remember her or not.
I don't think they intersected.
Maybe not.
It didn't
maybe
overlap.
Not. She came to visit one time not too long ago.
Yes.
But anyway, very
Thank
sweet
you.
lady, and she's passed on to be with the Lord now. Anyway, today we're talking about the sin harvested. The sin harvested, and so to get us going, I have to have my props. What is this?
Expensive
It's a hand holding up.
Winco. It's not expensive, it's cheap. Compared to C&H. There's other forms of sugar it also takes. Here's one of them. What's this?
Sprinkles.
Sprinkles! Well, it has a high content of sugar. I don't know if it's considered. Some people might consider, hey, I'll add some sugar to my thing here. But, sugar, okay? And on my handout, the first page of handout 1, Mary Poppins told us in 1964 that a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right? Sugar is a very familiar aspect of the human diet, and it can affect our health in profound ways. Just ask Steve, right? And about sugar.
I love sugar.
Yeah, I do too. But most of us are familiar with it coming in the form of like sugar cane, right? Or sugar beets. But there's actually many sources of sugar. I found out there's lots of them. As a chemical term, the real sugar is usually referred to as all carbohydrates of the general formula CN parenthesis H2O water close parenthesis N. Now, don't ask me. I'm not a chemist. I don't know what that means. But that's the general
Carbon,
formula.
nitrogen, water.
Yeah. So anyway, we are probably also familiar though with something called sugar substitutes. What are some substitutes for sugar that you're aware of? Splenda, yeah, that's a very popular one, isn't it? What's another one? Well, I forgot my props.
What's that?
Made from bananas.
I forgot my props.
I use
Splenda. What's another one?
Saccharin.
Saccharin, right? Saccharin's not used as much as it used to be, but
Yeah. Sucralose is
Sucrose?
Sucrose.
Yes.
aspartame.
Yeah,
Aspartame.
aspartame.
Now there's brand names and there's types, and so we're mixing them. That's okay.
Yes.
And I don't care. I just want the sugar substitute.
Stevia.
There's the other one. I was waiting for the other one. Stevia. I have stevia here.
Which is made from the stevia plant?
I guess so.
I
I
think
don't
it
know.
is. It's an all natural.
It's dextrose. It says.
Oh, no, then that's not it. A stevia in itself is a
Supposed to be a
plant.
plant,
Yeah,
yeah.
it doesn't
Which
really
is what I use.
say.
You do?
So,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
got an odd taste, but it's supposed to
It
be
does.
good. You get used to it like
yes.
anything.
Yeah.
I like Splenda, and I don't even taste it anymore.
Splenda and stevia are kind of the popular ones right now. But
Priva if you want, Fred Meyer.
any other brands you're familiar with or remember?
Sweet and low.
Sweet and Low.
Oh, yeah,
Sweet and Low.
that's-
Come on in. Good to see you today, Lila. Sweet and Low is another popular one. Okay, I wrote down some you may or may not know. One's called cyclamates. You remember the cyclamate scare? That was a sweetener that was the greatest thing on earth, and they said, oh, it causes cancer in laboratory rats. What they did is they force-fed Canadian rats 500 times the level of cyclamates. And guess what? It developed cancer. Well, guess what? You do that with any substance, even water, things are going to happen that aren't normal. But whatever the case, cyclamates came, and then because of that. What's another sugar substitute I have is sorbitol. Have you heard of sorbitol?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not used a lot, but it's used some. Saccharin was mentioned. Splenda was mentioned. Equal.
Oh, yeah.
Heard of Equal before? Yeah. Stevia, we talked about. I got this one called a guava.
A guava. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a.
Plant-based.
It's plant-based
Yeah.
and it's kind of syrupy.
Yeah. I don't know if that's it's a
They all
true.
have aftertaste.
I was going to get to that. You're stealing my thunder. No, that's okay. And I think we talked about trivia. Trivia.
Trivia.
Oh, that's another one.
Trivia.
That's a different one. Anyway, so those are some of the substitutes, right? When we take into our bodies these substitutes for sugar, are they really sugar?
No.
Or are they something profoundly different?
Different.
They are different, aren't they? They are different. And somebody already said, I can always tell, and I can too.
They trick
Lila.
you.
They trick you. Oh, it tastes just like sugar. Ugh, what is that? Aftertaste. It's that substitute aftertaste. Anyway,
Speaking of aspartame.
Aspartame. Oh, there you go.
Soda.
so this is the critical thing to remember. These sugar substitutes are profoundly different. Okay, they're not the real thing. To quote Coca-Cola's old commercial.
It's the real thing.
Now our transition. Sadly, though, people sometimes substitute other things for a true relationship with the real Christ, and that's what we're kind of focusing on today. That's why I'm using my prop of sugar and sugar substitutes. What might some of these things be that people substitute for a real relationship with Jesus?
Other human relationships.
Okay, that's true. We could go into a list of those things, but I think
Drugs, alcohol.
drugs can be an alcohol, which is actually kind of drug too, right? What? Anything else? Maybe substitute for a relationship with Christ?
Money.
Sports.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything you spend all your time doing.
So
I guess
there's the key. Anything that we put a priority on in our life, that's number one in our life, that's important in our life, right? And some of these things are noble things. Some people, they love to work Habitat for Humanity and build houses for the poor, and that's great. I'm not saying it's not. But if that's your main goal in life and you think that that's going to be somehow a good thing for where you're going to spend eternity, you might want to think about that again. There's another thing, it's called works salvation. You've probably heard of that before. That's when you do things because you think you have to get enough good things to balance out the bad things. And sometimes that can sneak into our lives in the form of things like working hard for the church. You know, well, I'm doing my job for the church, so God's got to love me. We don't say that out loud, but we sometimes think that, don't we? So these are substitutes for the real thing. And so Paul talked about a lot of those things also. We're not going to get into Paul's dissertation on that, but he warned about these things, and so did James in their writings about not having that real thing in your life. And we're going to look back at the Old Testament today at Hosea chapter 9. Excuse me, chapter 10. If you got my email, you probably got two of them, and I apologize. The first one was incorrect. I hope you deleted that one. The second one was correct, because it said correct on it. But anyway, we're going to be talking about false religion, like I said, misplaced trust, what could have been, and sowing in righteousness. Now, we've already talked about a little bit about Hosea in the preceding two sessions, right? My substitute teacher, which, by the way, did a great job. He wasn't the real thing, it wasn't me. But that's okay. No, I'm just joking. But I think Matthew did the first two sessions in Hosea. So you probably covered who Hosea was and what his purpose was and who he was a prophet for and all that. He's primarily speaking to, just a sort of a recap here, primarily Hosea spoke to who? What people group?
Israel.
Okay. Are we talking Israel as in the nation of Israel as a whole? Are we talking to
people,
a part of the...
Part of
oh,
the
you're
nation.
right. Okay, so on my handy-dandy map here. So Israel was the northern kingdom. Just a recap, right? Israel was also known as the northern kingdom, Israel, and Ephraim, by the way. The southern kingdom was known as the southern kingdom and Judah. Yeah, that was... So you got to get our terms right, because sometimes we think Israel as being the whole, but it wasn't. So Hosea spoke to that northern kingdom. It was an important message he had, because what was going to happen to that northern kingdom because of what they've been doing?
They're destroyed, right?
They're going to be destroyed. The Assyrians are going to come down out of the north, and they're going to sweep through this area first. So they're going to come under judgment first. So it's a real critical thing to let them know what's going on. And kind of recap again a little bit. I really like Hosea. There was a real problem with that when Moses came back down. So we had that aspect, right? What else do we see? Talking about the false things that they're now following.
The high places will be destroyed.
Okay, so they used high places, right? And high places was what?
Altars and things like that.
Yeah, worship centers for pagan gods. What were some of the pagan gods? Remember some of the pagan gods they worshipped?
Baal,
right?
Moloch.
They used the Asherah pole, which is a fertility worship thing too. I think those are the main ones. There's some other sub-gods.
Sun, moon, stars.
Yeah, that was some of the Egyptian gods. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And they were also relying on something else besides God. What else were they relying on? I'll give you a hint. It's in verse 6.
Foreign leaders. Foreign countries.
Foreign countries, yes! They were relying on giving tribute to other countries around, primarily Assyria, to pacify them, so they could maybe survive better that way, right? They also did have quite an army, as we're going to talk about later on, a lot of military, so they were relying on that also, instead of who they should have been relying on. God, right? So they were doing things. Let's see. You either have God or you have what? In a general category.
Mammon.
You rely on what?
Mammon.
Right. Well, okay, that's wealth, but us, man, people, ourselves, right? We rely on ourselves or rely on God. That's what it comes down to. When you boil all this stuff down, that's the two things. And what were they relying on? Themselves. The things they could do. Set up new idols here, make an alliance over these people they weren't supposed to do, make an alliance with these people they weren't supposed to do. All these different things they were doing, okay? And Hosea is saying these are false. They're going to be destroyed. Thorns and thistles are going to grow on those altars. You're going to eventually come to the point where you're going to be in dire need, and you're going to say even to the hills, what? Cover us, fall on us. Save us, from what's going to happen, the judgments that's going to happen. So, the primary thing I want to get is they were relying on themselves, right? So let's define that term here. What is self-reliance? What is self-reliance? To you?
I am woman, hear me work.
Oh, okay.
That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. That was
Yeah.
the 60s, I think.
Yes, it
Benny
was.
Friedan or whatever.
Yeah.
It's doing everything yourself. And
Doing your things yourself, okay. Anything else component-wise do you think of?
It's not just being independent, it's
Okay.
being totally independent.
Right.
With not allowing yourself to accept not only God's help, but anybody's help.
Right. Now, some self-reliance is a good thing. Please don't think I'm saying all self-reliance is bad. I'm not meaning that. I'm meaning in our relationship with God, are we relying on ourselves or relying on other things? Right? We talked about that already. And that's what when we couch it that way, we need to realize that, like I said, there are some aspects. God wants us to be self-reliant in certain things. He doesn't want us to live at home with our parents forever and ever and glom off them. We should go out in our life and do things, right? Get married, get jobs, whatever it might be. But when you take it to the extreme, is what we're talking about here, especially in our relationship with God. So I have a little, nobody looked at it and saw it. Page 2, sometimes I hide these things, on our handout. Handout number 1, page 2, second page. Self-reliance, depending only on one's own efforts and abilities. Your trust, faith, or confidence is centered on primarily yourself, your abilities, your knowledge, your power, to the exclusion or even rejection of any others. So you've all seen kids when they're little and you say, okay, I want to show you, son, how to make this kite we bought. No, I can do it myself. Have you heard that term before? Something like that. And when you come back later, it's in pieces. Because can they do it themselves? No, they can't do it themselves. They're too young. But they got that human instinct. I can do it myself. You've probably heard that before. I have heard it many times.
Even as they grow, my grandson, when he went to take his driver's test,
Yeah.
the oldest, of course, and the other ones aren't there yet, but I asked him, I said, did you read the book? Did you study the book? And he said, well, I read through it. And I went, okay, but do you know this in your head?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, you don't know what I don't know, or you don't know what I know, or and I'm going,
That's what I asked.
and of course he
He failed. Well, and that's part of how we learn, right?
Right.
And Israel's going to be learning through this process as well.
Oh, harshly learning.
But it's always good to learn the right way instead of the hard way. I don't know, but
It's a learning curve.
yeah. So, but you don't want to be rejecting things out of hand, and that's what we're talking about. Is well, I can do it myself, God. I don't need your help. That's the attitude we're talking about for the Christian. And so we're seeing that's what they're doing. Israel's doing that. They're saying, well, we can do it ourselves. We build these high places. We can make these alliances. We don't have to listen. We don't have to. That covenant they made with Moses, God made with us, many years ago. It's dusty. It's on the shelf. We're the hip new generation. We don't need it, right?
It reminds me of what some of the narrative is today, that the Constitution is old and and therefore needs to be rewritten.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the people in the Senate and the House and
No.
all the committees
No, I can't.
rewriting the
nightmare.
Constitution?
Yeah.
I know. It's just,
So we can see from these verses where they are dependent upon themselves, right, and their things and such, right?
They basically didn't. They felt that they don't need God.
Yeah, exactly.
yes, that's it.
They had rejected God, and I still remember back in the times of the judges where the people of Israel cried out, "We want to be like the other countries around us.
We want a king.
We want a king." Yeah. Well, but God is your king. Well, no, we want one of these kind of kings. It started back then with Israel, didn't it? Yeah. He was to be their king, and they rejected him. They got Saul, and they got what they deserved. Anyway, so it asks the question here: how does self-reliance instead of trust in God lead to disaster for the people of God? Well, we kind of talked about that already.
We're human.
We're human.
The kings
fail often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the idols and the foreign kings that they depend on were actually not dependable.
Yeah, they're out there. They're on their own good. They're not out for Israel's good, were they? So they were going to stab in the back, as we found out. Assyria did, right? Assyria comes down out of the north and sweeps through and enslaves most of the northern kingdom. those who trusted in the military and political regimes and kingdoms for their security would be overtaken by God at his choosing. Israel faced God's judgment because of their apostasy and their trust in military might of their own self-reliance instead of relying upon him as they should have. Do we run into that problem today? Do you think? We do too. As a nation even, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
You know, well, we got the strongest military in the world. We got the strongest economy in the world. And now
We're paying for it.
we're kissing the ring of this king of Saudi Arabia. We're
Fist bumping him.
yeah. We're going behind closed doors with Venezuela, which is a really rotten place, by the way.
Yeah.
Trying to make deals with these people for oil. You know.
Underhanded deals,
Mhm. So, yeah, we do the same thing in our own lives. Do we do the same thing sometimes? We can, right? Can Christians fall into that trap of trying to do things on their own instead of relying on God? Sure can. That's what we're talking about here.
Or
And
relying
we-
on other things,
Right,
not just ourselves, but
right.
other things, not God.
So-
Give me anything else. Give me anything else, but not God. You know.
Now, I'm not saying that Christians are worshiping false gods per se, but when we find that our priority is on other things instead of God, that's what we're worshiping.
When we trust on other things other than God,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So we got to be careful of that, don't we? Let's look at that misplaced trust in the next step here. Hosea chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. Those next two verses, I want you to listen for the consequences of Israel's sin. The consequences of Israel's sin. And I think I left that as a little... No, I didn't. You got that one.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so from the days of Gibeah, you have sinned, O Israel, there they stand. Will you not battle against the sons of iniquity and overtake them in Gibeah? When it is my desire, I will chastise them, and the peoples will be gathered against them when they are bound for their double guilt.
Okay. Misplaced trust. Have you ever misplaced your trust in somebody before? Mm-hmm. Oh, I have. And then you find a knife in your back. You're trying to pull it out, right? Or your front, yeah. And that can happen in life, can't it? Sure can, right? Now, it talks about an interesting thing here. It says, from the days of Gibeah, you have sinned. O Israel, there they stand. Wow. So, it talks again in later in that verse about being overtaken them in Gibeah. And so, what is this place Gibeah? Well, let me explain. Let me be a good example of that. I think Pearl Harbor is a good example. I'll just use that one. It's not the one that you're using or anything. I just pull one out of the sky here. But we were so confident. Nobody's going to attack us, the United States of America. And what happens? The Japanese attack us in Pearl Harbor, right? And it's like everybody's, oh, how could that happen to us? We didn't even detect them. And they did all this terrible thing to us, right? And so we had a great deal of introspection. This kind of thing is a terrible thing. It shouldn't happen. And then there's other things too. It's not as good an analogy as some other things, I'm sure. But essentially, that's what we're talking about in Gibeah. There's a thing that happened in Gibeah that was renowned. It was well known. It was infamous. It was horrible. And in the lesson book, it talks about it. And I have some in my Bible commentary as well. But if you look on page 85, it starts there. It's talking about this episode from Judges 19 through 21. You may have remembered it. It was a very shameful and sad episode in Israel's history. A Levite and his concubine were traveling to Jerusalem and stopped for the night in Gibeah. A crowd of people surrounded them and called for the homeowner to send the Levite out to the crowd for their sexual perversion. Now, Gibeah was a major town in the area controlled by the tribe of Benjamin, by the way. Anyway, so instead, the people sent his concubine, and she was abused and over, apparently, and left for dead on the doorstep of the house. The Levite returned to Jerusalem with the dead body of his concubine. He then cut her into 12 pieces, and he called for the 12 tribes of Israel to take vengeance on the residents of Gibeah. 11 tribes assembled against the city, but the tribe of Benjamin defended its own city. This resulted in a civil war in Israel. and it brought shame upon the tribe of Benjamin. And the people of Gibeah had taken their stand there, and the war against the evildoers finally overtook the people of the city of wickedness. So we're talking about wickedness on probably on par, it sounds like, with Sodom and Gomorrah, happening in Israel, in one of the major tribe areas of Benjamin. So this is basically referring to Israel's morality had slid down to the level of these people in Gibeah, is what Hosea is saying. You are in that area, you're approaching that zone, is what he's saying. That's terrible, right? So they were a nation under compass, is what he's basically saying. And their discipline would be similar to the time of Gibeah. What happened? Civil war. Nothing is worse than civil war, folks. Our country went through a civil war, and it was horrible. The percentage of people who were killed, by percentage, you've never seen a war like that we've ever been involved in. Never.
We lost more of our citizens in that war
Yeah.
than we did in World War I and II combined.
And we were smaller.
Yeah.
We were smaller in population. That's the thing to remember. So these civil wars are horrible, and that's what happened in this situation. They had the civil war. They fought against each other, against brothers and such like that. It goes on to talk about that the reason for this judgment against Israel was their double sin. Based on the reference to Gibeah, this twofold sin would most likely be their love of immoral pleasure and their dependence on their own military. Again, their self-reliance and rejection of God, right? And to keep the nation from facing judgment, their morals were wrecked. Therefore, their trust in military and political regimes for their security was misplaced. They would be overtaken by a foreign army, and God would be the root of that downfall. And this finally occurred in 722 BC when Samaria fell to the Assyrian army. And so that's a good synopsis of that, but you should read that in the actual text too. It's really something if you've never read that before. It was a horrible time. So when he refers back to that, it's a time of shame. It's a time of heartache. A time of terrible, terrible judgment especially upon Benjamin, because they all basically went against Benjamin. And Benjamin got knocked down to like only 600 people. 600 men survived. That's what it was, 600 men. It's interesting to read the whole story about that, what they did when they realized what had happened to what they'd done. And they tried to help Benjamin afterwards. But anyway, so that's what it's referring to. It's a terrible thing. And he's bringing this up right now in their faces. He's saying, this is what you're like. You're like these people in Gibeah, whatever, however you pronounce that. Would you think that would maybe wake up the people a little bit? Mm-hmm. I would hope so. You know, if we were to say you're being lax about the security of our country, just like before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, it'd be something like that almost. That's not even close to it, I guess. But things like that in our own history. They needed to stop trusting in themselves and allowing themselves to slide down further and further down this incline that they were going on. Trusting instead of God, they were trusting in their own, political stuff, their kingdom and stuff, things like that, and their military strength. And they had this false sense of security. So Hosea explained that God had a plan for Ephraim. Now Ephraim is, again, another name for 5 points. Israel or the northern kingdom. Yeah. I know, why they got all these different names? They just do. The country was to plow and sow righteousness and reap kindness. They were to be busy breaking up the ground in anticipation of the Lord's coming to them. Were they doing that? No. We are to do the same thing, right? We're supposed to be preparing for that second coming of the Lord. So it does come back to where we are in our worlds today as Christians. So let's look at the next point, number 3. Yeah. What could have been? What could have been? Don't you like to play that game? How many here love to play what could have been? Usually it's after I've done something really stupid. And I say, man, why'd I buy that car? It's been nothing but a heartache, or whatever it might be.
I should have.
Yeah. So for these next 2 verses, I want you to note what could have been if Israel had stayed true to God. And this is Hosea. Hosea is painting this picture for them. This is where you are. This is where you could have been. Which choice do you want? It's like, I can't make it any plainer. Have you ever done that with kids especially? Now you could disobey and be punished. Or you could do what I want and get a reward. Which is it you want? Kind of an interesting way of looking at it too, right? Let's look at these verses. Steve, I think I gave that to you if you don't mind doing it. And you weren't here at the time. Verses 11 and 12. That's why that piece of paper is there.
Yeah. Okay, Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh, but I will come over her fair neck with a yoke. I will harness Ephraim, Judah will plow, Jacob will harrow for himself. Sow with a view to righteousness, reap in accordance with kindness, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord until he comes to rain righteousness on you.
Okay, there's interesting terminology he's using here. Again, he's using agrarian language, right? Agrarian meaning agriculture. You know, these people, most of them had what? Vineyards. They had olive trees. They had that's too early. Shame on me. They had flocks of sheep and cattle, right? So people know what he's talking about here. He's referring to Israel as a trained heifer, a strong calf, capable and willing to thresh. This likely refers to a heifer that's walking around the threshing floor, helping to separate the grain from the ears. These cows were allowed the freedom of eating while they were working. And that's also talked about in Deuteronomy 25:4. Do not muzzle the ox while threshing. You remember that old term. So in other words, the ox is doing work for you, so they should be allowed to eat too. Anyway, so side thing. This is a picture of the liberty that Israel enjoyed, though. They enjoyed this before being taken into captivity. They enjoyed this freedom. And that's what you have now. He says, you have that, and this could continue if you would follow God. That's one of the things, right? What else does it say? It says that, but, oh no, here comes the but here. I will come over her fair neck with a yoke. I will harness Ephraim. Judah will plow. Jacob will harrow for himself. And so, with a view to righteousness. Okay? So, he says, I'll control you, and you need to do this. You need to be involved in this sowing of righteousness instead, right? And so this is a picture of being a very fruitful enterprise for people for following God. Okay? That's what they're saying here. They were to sow this righteousness and be in other words, to be completely devoted to Him, right? They were supposed to have that devotion to God. They're not supposed to be getting off track. God had a plan for them, and they were supposed to follow what that plan was. You know, the outline that He gave them, right? And they apparently were not. And He's saying, you need to do this. This is the picture of what you should be doing. So from these verses, we see results had been different if Israel had stayed true to God, right? If they had remained true to God, would the results be different, you think, than what they experienced? Sure would. That's what he's saying. Same thing for us in our lives as well, right? When we follow God versus when we don't follow God, the results are better when we follow the Lord. And so that's what he's saying. To avoid this judgment, Israel needs to do these things. Hosea emphasized that Israel plowed unrighteousness and produced injustice, though. So we see that that's what he did. And we're going to talk about that in the next section here. And what they face now. So the last section, which I know they rang the bell, but we're going to get it done. The last verses is 13 through 15. I want you to listen for the future, what the future held for Israel. Go ahead.
You have plowed wickedness. You have reaped injustice. You have eaten the fruit of lies, because you have trusted in your ways, in your numerous warriors. Therefore, the tumult will arise among your people, and all your fortresses will be destroyed, as Shalman destroyed Beth Arbel on the day of battle, when mothers were dashed in pieces with their children. Thus it is. Let's try that again. Thus it will be done to you at Bethel, because of your great wickedness. At dawn, the king of Israel will be completely cut off.
So he's saying, this is what it could be, but this is what is going to happen. Because you failed.
You blew it.
You didn't make the Lord your God the priority in your life. You instead went on to other gods and other things. You were more self-reliant instead of relying on God. This is going to happen. This unrighteousness, when you sow unrighteousness, again, that's another agrarian term, right? What does that mean? Planting seeds of unrighteousness. What are you going to harvest?
Nothing.
Well, you're going to harvest good,
Evil.
right? Evil things, yeah. It'll be a bad harvest.
Yeah.
You want to sow righteousness, you have a great, wonderful harvest. But in this case, he's pointing out that you know what happens when you put a seed in the ground. You get that. It's going to grow up and be a nice big thing when you sow whatever it is. And you're sowing the wrong thing. You're going to get the wrong thing back. It's because of what you've done. Interesting, it says, and it will be done to you at Bethel, or Bethel. Bethel was, again, that center of worship. They were supposed to be worshiping God alone, right? And instead they were worshiping the golden calf, the Asherah, the Baals, and they had set them up at Bethel, the sacred place. They had set these things up.
It became the center of hypocrisy.
Yes, of paganism now. And so it talks about as Shalman destroyed Beth Arbel on the day of battle. So they think that Shalman was this this guy. What was the guy's name?
Oh, Shaman. of
He was
Assyria. Shaman.
he was the Assyrian king at the time, and I was going to look at the name of that guy, and I don't have it.
Shalmaneser?
Oh, here it is. Shalmaneser, I think. And then there was also another guy involved too, besides him, but he was one of the main ones. He might have been Shalmaneser the Fifth or something like that. I can't remember. I got too many things in my brain. But that's what was going to happen. He's saying they're going to come and they're going to destroy you. They're going to sweep down out of the north, and they're going to come through, and they're going to be exacting the vengeance that I have told you about, because you have not changed. So we got some summary points. We're going to finish up here. But anyway, so while the Old Testament speaks of judgment against nations, the New Testament shifts to judgments related to individuals. Both the New and Old Testament reveal that sin will result in judgment. You know, and it's a true ism, right? And in our own lives as Christians, if we do things unrighteous, what are we going to reap? Unrighteous type things, right? Disaster for us. So it's the same. Main points we talked about here. The first one is that Christians must beware of substituting religious practices for a relationship with God. We must beware of that. Don't do that in your life. Don't let those other things crowd God out. Make God the priority, right? Second, Christians should trust God in all areas of life. And that's a good thing to do. Third point, Christians should focus on righteousness as they await the return of Christ. We should be working for the Lord. You know, there's a lot of great hymns that talk about doing that very same thing, right? Getting prepared. And last point, all people are accountable for their actions. Was Israel going to avoid judgment? No. Is Judah going to avoid judgment later? No. Will we avoid judgment if we follow that kind of path? No. So we need to be right on the right path, following God. That's what the story, the theme of this particular part of Hosea is about. They're going to harvest what they planted.
You reap what you sow.
Yeah, that's right. You reap what you sow. I've heard that before.
Yep.
Exactly right. So think about these questions. Just think about questions. There's not time for them. But how do we see accountability lived out, or even how is it ignored in our society right now? We've talked about that already. What are some examples you can think of unrighteousness that we see in our community today? Also, how can we sow seeds that will correct some of these unrighteous acts? What proactive things can we do with God to help in that situation?
Be in His Word.
Yeah, there you go. Witness to others. Tell what other people who don't know Christ. Or help a brother who's slipped into sin, who is a Christian, bring him back, right? Last is how can we point others to Jesus while addressing these actions? Again, I talked about that already. Let's close the word of prayer. Unless somebody has a question or comment. I hate to rush it because it rang the bell on me, but I think it's a great lesson. So
They're going to come down here after you.
I know they're going to come. I know. Here they come pretty soon. All right. Lord, I just pray for these situations in our own lives, Lord. I pray that you would show us mercy and draw us to a closer relationship with you. Make that a priority in our hearts, Lord. We should seek you. And that's the most important thing, Lord. Just pray that you'd also help to focus our righteousness in our own lives. And as we wait the Parousia, Lord, the coming of our Savior, we look forward to that time, that second coming. But we better be ready. We better be that person who's prepared as well. Thank you so much in your Son's precious name. Amen. I was trying to... What was that chorus? Seek ye first the kingdom of God. and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Now this comes from a verse in the New Testament, I think. It might be Old Testament, but that's a good adage to remember in our lives. Thank you guys.
All right.
Appreciate it. Good comments, good discussion. I appreciate you guys so much. I hope you
We
enjoyed
appreciate
the.
you, the lesson was great.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it.
It was good to see y'all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Good
Bye.
day.
Thank you for being with us. This is Grace Baptist Church, the Adult Word Bible Study. My name is Norm Ellis. Please stand by this YouTube channel because we have Pastor Derek, I think, preaching today.
Yes.
So we're looking forward to hearing that. All right. Thank you very much.
Lila, don't leave before today. Oh yeah, receipt.
Don't leave before
Thank you.
today.
Oh, well,
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you.
good discussions. Good class. Good message. Even though we don't like to hear about sin, we need to be reminded of it.
Yep.
So how long before you guys are leaving?
We're leaving sometime this week.
Oh
We're
man,
loading tomorrow.
I don't like to hear that.
I know. I will be back. Next year I will be back and soon maybe
Oh, really?
stay for a month.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad to
I'll
hear
do that every year.
I'd be glad to hear. Good. You got too many friends. You got family out here too? Is there family out here? I can't remember. There's
Family here?
Yeah, there's family out here too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was pretty sure there was.
Yeah, they're all here.
I didn't know if anybody moved
That's why
away.
I come back and visit.
All right. Well, thank you again. And we're gonna miss you so much.
Congratulations.
We're gonna miss. Oh, thank you very much.
Having a new baby in the family.
Yeah, baby and mom are doing great. Thank you, sir. I'm gonna try to bumble through it, but